Welcome back to the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. You're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer. So please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. For today's show, what are we discussing? Well, the D-backs made a major move in free agency today, picking up all-star closer Mark the Shark Melancon. So we got to break down that deal. There's been some reportings on other potential relievers the D-backs are going to try to go after in free agency. So we're going to talk about those players, and then we're going to wrap up the pod with our final game of stock up, stock down. We got 3 pitchers left I want to talk about. So we're going to be talking about all that on today's pod. But if you want more content by me, don't be afraid to just hit that follow button on Twitter at CreatorThomas24 for my personal account, or just look up Locked On Diamondbacks on both Twitter and Instagram for the podcast handle. And before we get into today's pod, I first want to say thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be doing this podcast without you, the listener, because you listen, you share, you subscribe, you review, you do all that so I can do this podcast for you. So thank you. But now let's jump right into the podcast. Locked On Diamondbacks.
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Millard Thomas of Locked On Diamondbacks back here, and we have to first start the podcast by talking about the major move the D-backs made in free agency, because listen, I came into this offseason like a lot of D-backs fans where we weren't cautiously optimistic. We were just cautious because we know this D-backs team doesn't want to spend money. Mike Hazen has basically admitted this team is not going to be a contender next season. I can see why. This was one of the worst teams in baseball in 2020, and this was literally the second worst team in baseball, the worst team in baseball going into the last day of the regular season, the second worst team in baseball after the last day of the regular season, because the D-backs, of course, in D-backs fashion, want to walk it off on the last day of the regular season. Well, now we come to the offseason where it felt like the D-backs probably aren't going to do anything. It felt like this was a team, since they didn't do much the last 2 seasons, since they were as bad as they've been the last 2 seasons. Maybe they were just going to look at this offseason to maybe retool, maybe unload some of their better players. Who knows? We were ready for anything this offseason. But one thing I was not ready for was for the D-backs to sign one of the best relievers on the market in Mark the Shark Melancon, because he is legitimately one of the best relievers. Because we're going to talk about his stats here in just a second to really illustrate how good Mark Melancon has been this past season and over his career. But if you want one stat as a little teaser, a little appetizer to know how good Mark Melancon has been, his 244 saves rank 4th among active relievers, behind only Craig Kimbrell, Kenley Jansen, and Aroldis Chapman. That lets you know how great Mark Melancon has been throughout his career. And the contract for him, for a guy that was an all-star this past season, who led the National League in saves, a contract for Mark Melancon you would probably expect 15 a year, 10 million a year. I don't know what you would expect, but if I told you he's only going to make $14 million over the next 2 years with the $5 million mutual option in 2024, I think you'll sign up for that. It's actually only $6 million. I think it was reported 2 years, 14, but I think it's officially only $6 million he's going to be paid in 2022 and 2023. So it's an absolute steal for Mark Melancon. And now let's get into some of those numbers that really illustrate how good this guy has been, because I cannot believe the D-backs went out there and executed this deal. When we look at the last 2 off seasons, the relievers the D-backs are bringing in, the relievers, excuse me. I'm so excited about this Mark Melancon deal that I'm literally getting too worked up about it. I literally can't talk. I'm so happy about it, because the last 2 off seasons, the relievers the D-backs have been bringing in are just old, past their prime, and not reliable. Joakim Soria, Chris Davinsky, Junior Guerrera, Hector Rondon, the relievers Mike Hazen has been trying to find on the margins has not been working out for this D-backs team, this D-backs squad. But I think this Mark Melancon move definitely will, because now let's talk about some of those stats. Well, I just mentioned he's coming off an all-star appearance, had the most saves in the National League with 39, but he also had a 2.23 ERA with a 3.36 FIP. His strikeout percentage was at 22%, and then his ground ball percentage was at 56%. League average was only 43.8%. That ground ball percentage is one of the reasons why he's been one of the most effective relievers in the game since entering baseball. He doesn't have overwhelming stuff in terms of high velocity. He's not a guy that's going to throw out that. He's not a guy that's going to go out there and throw 99, 100, not even 96 miles an hour. This is a guy who's going to be in those low 90s with the fastball. Like a lot of these relievers on this D-back staff, the relievers just seem to target guys who don't throw very hard. Maybe that's their MO. Maybe that's their philosophy. And it would fit when you look at Mark Melancon because he doesn't throw super hard either, but he is really effective as a pitcher. His home run rate of 1.4% is less than half the big league average, which is 2.9%. This guy, Mark Melancon, is absolutely devastating against lefties. So if we ever just want to use him as a specialist, if we felt like he wasn't as good as a closer anymore, we at least know this guy is dominant against the lefties. 150 average and 410 OPS allowed against the lefties this past season. He's elite with runners in scoring position, 197 average and 509 OPS allowed with runners in scoring position. And he's something that the D-backs couldn't get before. He's a pitcher that's good in high leverage moments. 206 average and 609 OPS allowed in high leverage moments. And just a quick tidbit. That's, a quick tidbit that's non-related to what we're talking about here. My throat's feeling a little dry, so if I cough in the next 30 seconds, that is why. But Mark Melancon, only two earned runs allowed the entire season on 0 days of rest. Over 15 innings pitched, he only allowed 2 earned runs on 0 days of rest. This is a guy that you could put out there almost every single day, and he's not going to mess it up for you. 2021 was his lowest ERA since 2016, if we don't count the 2020 season, which I think we all put an asterisk on. And you got to remember that 2.23 ERA he had this past season, it was more like a 1.7 ERA, because you can't forget this man had Fernando Tatis, the worst defensive player in baseball, behind him. So it was really like his ERA was a 1.3 because of the defense he had behind him. So Mark Melancon was phenomenal. Even his hard contact rate, his exit velocity allowed of 86.4 miles per hour this past season was his lowest since 2017. And his 36% hard hit percentage allowed isn't too bad either. Again, Mike Hazen has basically said this is a team that's not contending next season, which is why I'm so surprised that he went out there and got a pitcher like Mark Melancon, because I thought Mark Melancon was probably going to be linked to a contending team and not arguably the worst team in baseball. But the bullpen is an area the D-backs desperately needed help in. They finished last in the NL. In saves with just 22. They were also dead last in the National League in save percentage at just 44%. So maybe this is the long play for Mark Melancon. Maybe he's like, I'm going to come to Arizona, basically my hometown state, because he pitched for the University of Arizona. So, Mark, we're going to have to get that sorted out and get you some Sun Devil gear. But he's basically coming back to his home state. He's getting maybe more money than he would have gotten from other teams. And then he could come here, ball out, and maybe at the deadline this season or next season, he gets traded to a contender and he rides out into the sunset of maybe a World Series or a nice postseason run. Who knows? But right now, I don't care about that. I don't care about the deadline. I just care about this move right here, right now, because it was something I did not expect. I'm super hyped, if you can't tell. I could barely talk right now because I'm so hyped for this move. So now I'm getting a little more excited for this season than I would have been. Of course, this is not the kind of move that's going to mean the D-backs make the postseason next year. But when we start stacking the moves the D-backs have been making in the offseason, Jordan Luplow, he's not an elite outfielder, but he is a solid, good player who is not a negative on the diamond. That's going to help the team next season. Now you add an all-star closer to the bullpen that was starving for talent. that's going to be a plus to this team next season too. So I want to continue to watch how this team builds and progresses through my case and through the offseason, because right now this team is slowly getting better, picking up the pieces, and maybe they think they can make a wild card run. When you look at a team like the Giants, who just lost Kevin Gosman, they might be losing Chris Bryant. The Dodgers are still going to be in the mix, but the rest of the NL West, Colorado just lost John Gray. We'll see Trevor Story. I'm not sure this NL West is going to be very good next season outside the Dodgers. That's really the only team I'm confident in. Of the Padres, they'll probably be around too, but we just stole Mark Melancon from them. So overall, this D-backs team, I like what they're doing this offseason, and they're getting me more optimistic than I thought I would have been about the 2022 season at this point of free agency. Now, we're going to talk about other potential relievers the D-backs might go after this free agency. And if you're wondering why my mic looks so big, is because I got a new mic. So if the audio quality sounds a little bit better, a little bit crisper, it's because I upgraded to a Blue Yeti on Black Friday. So that is why. But now we're going to talk about those other potential relievers that the D-backs might go after. But first, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Sorry, BetOnline. Let me repeat that. BetOnline has you covered all season. More props, odds, and lines than ever before. As football season continues to march to the playoffs, BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. Head to our new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right. Let's get back into the podcast. And this mic is just extremely big. The reason why it's off to the side here is because I don't put it right in front of my face like I normally do. It will just cover my face with the way this laptop is set up. Because Dell, why did you put the camera at the bottom of the laptop? I need to upgrade to a MacBook, one of those new 16-inch MacBooks over Christmas. If one of my listeners want to hook me up, listen, you can find my Venmo at Millard Thomas. Online, just send me some money for a new MacBook if you want. You don't have to, but it's just an idea. Or if Apple, you hear this, don't be afraid to send me a new MacBook either. But let's get back into the podcast. Enough silliness, enough goofiness, and let's talk about other potential relievers the D-backs might go after this offseason, because according to Zach Buchanan, there's 3 pitchers the D-backs are reportedly interested: Willie Peralta, Hunter Strickland, and Brian Shaw. So let's break down each player, the pros, the cons of each player, and I'll give you my thoughts as to who I would want the D-backs to go after. So let's first start with the first guy, Willie Peralta, right-handed pitcher. He was pretty good in 2021. He had a 3.07 ERA, but it could have been a little fluky. A 4.94 FIP, 3.7 walks per 9, and a 5.4 strikeouts per 9. So really not that much difference between his strikeout rate and his walk rate. And he started 18 games in 2021. The D-backs really don't need another mediocre starter. The D-backs need more of a reliever. So just right there, I think this is probably not a great fit. And he's been a guy who's been a reliever. This is the guy who's bounced around between relieving and starting. So if the D-backs want to bring him in and make him a full-time reliever, it's not something he has not been accustomed to. Like, he was pretty much a reliever the last couple seasons before 2021. So he's been bouncing around between starter and reliever. But his career ERA as a reliever is slightly above 6, while it's around 4 as a starter. And as I just mentioned, the D-backs need more bullpen arms than they need starter arms. So considering this guy, Willie Peralta, is really terrible, kind of garbage as a reliever, he's serviceable as a starter. But as a reliever, you probably shouldn't be putting him in high leverage moments out of your bullpen. So right there, I'm not in love with a Willie Peralta. Some more career numbers for him: 16.6 strikeout percentage for his career, 8.9% walk percentage, 89.2 mile an hour exit velo, 41% hard hit percentage. He gives up a lot of hard contact. He doesn't strike out a ton, and he walks a good amount of people. So all the numbers suggest to me that he's a pretty volatile guy. 2021 might be a fluke. So because of that, he's going to be 33 years old. I think I'm going to stay off of Willie Peralta. Next up, Hunter Strickland. And I think I like this guy. If I had to pick, this might be the guy I choose for a potential D-backs target because another guy with a good ERA, 2.61 ERA in 2021, but a 4.19 FIP. Whenever you see that FIP a point and a half, 2 points better than your ERA, it does make you question and scratch your head. But for his career, a 3.11 ERA and a 3.76 FIP, that gives me a lot of optimism entering next season. He's played for 6 teams the last 3 years, so it makes me wonder, is that a good or a bad thing? Do teams really want him, or are they just trying to give him away? Like, if you've been on 6 teams the last 3 seasons, that means teams either really want you or they really don't want you. So I can't decide with Hunter Strickland, but I feel like more teams would want him than not want him because his hard hit percentage has been below 30% the last 3 years, an exit velo of 86 miles per and his exit velo of 86 miles per hour this past season was a career low. So this is someone who's actually trending in the right direction. He's been a pretty good pitcher his whole career, really, outside of 2019. Some of his hard contact numbers are improving as well. So really, if you don't count 2022, because that was where I'm not counting 2020 basically for any free agent I look at this season, next season, like pretty much whenever I look at baseball players, 2020 is always going to be that year that I just omit when I look at their baseball reference. So I omit it for these 3 guys as well. He's been a pretty good pitcher in his career outside of 2019, not 2020. Pretty good pitcher outside of 2019 with hard contact rate numbers improving as well. Career 22% strikeout rate. Only negative is he gives up ground balls almost as much as he gives up fly balls. Some years they're pretty much neck and neck. It'll be like 33% ground ball rate with a 32% fly ball rate. So that makes me a little hesitant, but overall, he's got a career track record of a good ERA, good FIP, good overall hard contact numbers. So because of all that, I would be pro going after Hunter Strickland in free agency. And the last guy we're going to talk about, Bryan Shaw, right-handed pitcher. All 3 of these guys are righties. The D-backs could use another lefty arm, but we'll continue talking about these righties for now. Bryan Shaw, 3.49 ERA this past season, was below 5.3 ERA for the first time since 2017. Just think about that. His ERA was below a 5.3 for the first time since 2017. I don't think I have to say much more after that, but we'll continue. 4.53 FIP this season, which is not very good, and a double-digit walk percentage in 3 of his last 4 seasons. Again, D-backs, why are you targeting this guy? Career exit velocity is 88 miles per hour, and a career hard hit percentage at 37% is not that great either. Walk percentage for his career is 9%. Hard contact numbers are bad. So why do the D-backs want him? Well, his career ground ball percentage is at 49%. That's pretty much the saving grace when it comes to Bryan Shaw. He induces a lot of ground balls, but guess what? I don't care when you're giving up hard contact consistently and you're getting beat up for runs. You can only be considered a ground ball pitcher if those ground balls aren't going through the hole every time and scoring 2 runs from dudes being on second and third because you walked one and gave up a double to another. Like, I don't want to hear it. So I'm not a big fan of Bryan Shaw. So overall, all 3 guys are coming off good seasons in 2021 when looking at their ERA. But if you go back to their previous full season, which would be 2019, not 2020, all of them are looking a little murky in that 2019 season, even a Hunter Strickland. But the difference is Bryan Shaw and a Willie Peralta, their FIP, their peripheral numbers suggest that they could be in line for regression, while Hunter Strickland has a pretty large track record of success. So because of that, give me Hunter Strickland, and you could kick out the other 2 guys because I don't really need them. Now, we're going to wrap up the pod with our last game of stock up, stock down. But first, all right, sorry for the awkward pause there. That is where the live reads are going to go after I post this podcast to the streaming platforms, but I'm not doing that live on YouTube, so that's why I have to do that awkward little pause there. But let's get back into the podcast, and let's now play a game of stock up, stock down, and I got 3 Diamondbacks pitchers for you. I got Taylor Widener, I got Luke Weaver, and I got Caleb Smith. So let's first start with Taylor Widener, who I believe his stock is up. I think he was the best Diamondbacks pitcher through April, which isn't saying much. That was basically only 4 starts, but still, This D-backs pitching staff started off really slow, but Taylor Widener was kind of the saving grace that first month of the season, a former top prospect in the organization. So maybe we shouldn't be as surprised to the fact that he was pretty solid this past season, but he still blew out my expectations, honestly. Taylor Widener was not a guy I had high hopes for this past season, and I thought he pitched better than I would have thought. His walks and hard contact allowed was a bit of an issue for him, but his ERA and some of his stats, I think, were inflated by the rough stretch he had when he came back from injury. He gave up at least 5 earned runs in 3 of his first 4 starts when he came back from injury, but after that, 4 straight starts of 2 earned runs or less. He looked really good after that. It was a little shaky as a reliever, so I'm not really sure if that's going to be the role the D-backs want to give him next season. Maybe if he's a full-time reliever, those numbers would help to even out. I'm not too sure, but if Taylor Widener is just the fifth starter, is the fifth starter next year for this D-backs team, I think I would like that a lot. Actually, we'll see. Maybe some other guy would emerge, like a Corbin Martin, or maybe the D-backs decide to go out there and sign another starter to compete for that fifth spot in the rotation. But right now, if you told me Taylor Widener entering the 2022 season is going to be the number 5 starter for the D-backs, I wouldn't mind that. Some of his numbers were pretty good in 2021. It's 567 OPS allowed with runners in scoring position. I'll definitely take that. Taylor Widener just needs to improve in some key areas like the hard contact and not walking dudes as much, but he's young. It was only his second season, former top prospect in the organization. I thought he showed a lot of promise in 2021. I'm not sure if he's ever going to be a frontline starter or a major contributor to a playoff team, but considering what I saw in 2021, I'm down to give Taylor Widener more opportunity next season. Now, the next guy I want to talk about is Luke Weaver, maybe the most polarizing guy on this D-back squad. And I have to say, in my personal opinion, I think Luke Weaver's stock is down entering next season. Now, you can make a case that maybe it should be up considering 2019 was way better than 2020. And his game log didn't look too bad after coming back from injury this past season. But overall, I don't think he looked great this year. He didn't look that strong to start the season before he got hurt the first time. And also, the fact that he keeps getting hurt and missing time isn't good for this D-back squad, too. They need players who can be healthy. Luke Weaver is young. He should be playing more than he is, but somehow he's always missing time. His 4% home run percentage is way too high for a starter. His hard hit percentage was above 40%, and his exit velo was at 89 miles per hour. His hard contact numbers are off the rails. He gets absolutely crushed when he pitches. Dudes are just teeing off against Luke Weaver. His 9.4% barrel percentage was a career high this past season. The only time he cracked 9 other than 2021 was 2020. And before that, it never even cracked 7. So the fact that it was at 9 this past season is really alarming. He's basically turned into a 2-pitch guy. He threw the fastball and changeup over 90% of the time in 2021. I think that's a big reason why his hard contact numbers flew off the map this past season. Why they went up drastically is because hitters can lock in. They know if it's not the fastball, it's going to be the changeup. And if it's not the changeup, then it's going to be the fastball. When you're only throwing 2 pitches, you become way more predictable. And I think that's just unsustainable for a guy who we once considered maybe a number 2 starter in a future playoff rotation. So right now, Luke Weaver just seems to be getting worse and worse every season. 2021 was not as bad as the shortened season last year, but still, it was not the 2019 season that had all of us oohing and eyeing at the potential of a Luke Weaver in this rotation with a Carson Kelly after that Paul Goldschmidt trade. So right now, Luke Weaver, your stock is down for me entering the 2022 season. And then last on the list, we got Caleb Smith, and the stock is up for Caleb Smith if we're talking about the reliever, but as a starter, the stock is down for Caleb Smith. So why do I say that? Well, Caleb Smith is absolutely a bum as a starter, and I don't like to use that word lightly. If I'm calling you a bum, it's accurate because Caleb Smith, I think, was garbage as a starter in 2021, and really his 2 years in a D-backs uniform. I mean, he was fine after the deadline last season, but overall, his pitching career has not been that great of a starter. And this past season, when he did start games for the D-backs, he had a 6.95 ERA. He loves to give up home runs and walks when he's starting, but when he's a reliever, all that suddenly stops. A 2.7 ERA as a reliever, and his home runs and walks allowed nearly cut in half or more. They literally slice in half or better when he's relieving versus starting. He's one of the few lefty arms the D-backs have, so I'm glad that they brought him back on a cheap deal. If we're talking about Caleb Smith as a full-time reliever for next season, then he might be a real weapon out the bullpen. This guy could be really good for this D-backs team. And actually, you can look at that contract and think, this guy, Caleb Smith, is being underpaid, and he's actually steal for this D-backs team. As a reliever, he can strike out dudes pretty effectively. His stuff isn't too bad. He's got like a mid-90s fastball. Caleb Smith is not the worst pitcher in the world as a reliever. As a starter, I might tell you he's the worst pitcher in baseball, but I like Caleb Smith as a reliever. The D-backs have to be smart, and make sure they bring him out the bullpen full time, because if the D-backs decide to give this guy the number 5 spot in the rotation next season, I'm going to be pulling out my hair every 5 days. And guys, the reason I don't have any hair right now is because of Caleb Smith's 2021 season as a starter. So D-backs, please make him a bullpen arm. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow, because I believe we're going to have Javi Reyes of Locked On Padres to discuss Mark Melancon and what he can bring to the D-backs. So you're going to want to be on the lookout for that. Thank you once again for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be doing this podcast without you. Go make your second listen Locked On Bets with Lee Sterling and your boy Q to get some extra money in your pocket. Of course, come back tomorrow for the best Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. And as always, stay safe and stay healthy. Deuces!